This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Morning. It's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news today about gold, one of my favorite subjects. And all you gold bugs or people that need to be gold and silver bugs, this is your program today. So, I've been collecting. I started collecting silver in 1964 when I noticed that my silver coins had copper in them. And I went, what the hell? Why do they have copper in silver? So that's when I started collecting these silver coins, dimes, quarters, and half dollars. And so I collected them, and then my mother spent them. So they're gone.
It's funny that you say that, because when I was really young then, but I was collecting it also. I don't know why I was collecting it, but I have a little box of silver quarters, silver dimes. I don't know why I was doing it, but I was doing it.
And we're going to go into that because there's a spiritual component to silver and gold. Now, all you religious freaks out there, you may want to run because if you think the love of money is the root of all evil.
This is not your program.
We're going to be talking about God's money, silver and gold. And then there's also Bitcoin, which is people's money. But anyway, and then I started collecting gold in 1973. After Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard in 71, August 15th, 1971. And for some reason, I was flying in Vietnam as a Marine pilot, and my rich dad warned me. He says, you better go get some gold. I said, what the hell is gold? And of course, we didn't have any money, but gold back then was illegal. Americans were not allowed to own gold. So I found all this out, and the more I found out, the more curious I got. So since I was in Vietnam, I was reading the map, and there was this little gold mine. It said AU for gold, and a pick and a shovel. There's only one problem. The gold mine was behind enemy lines. So being Marines, we're not the brightest guys on earth. I said, oh, no problem. Let's go find some gold. So we flew behind enemy lines. I write about this in my book, Fake. And I'm standing at this little gold window with a little Vietnamese woman with the red teeth because they eat beetle nuts. And I was gold was now floating from $35 to about $50 an ounce. And I was trying to get a discount because she was behind enemy lines. She just laughed at me. She laughed at us. She goes, spot. And although we didn't speak Vietnamese, I understood spot. So what does spot mean? Basically, for those who may not know what spot means, that means gold is the same price all over the world. It's different in different currencies, like it's more expensive in pesos than dollars. But spot is gold's price all over the world. And then the lights started to go on. I'm going, what the hell? How come we don't learn about this in school? So I've been a gold bug and silver bug since 64 and 72. And my plan for success was just save silver and gold. Right, Kim?
Yep. Yeah. You introduced me to silver in 1985, 86. We started buying silver. And now with the market so crazy in the gold and silver markets right now, this is a really, really appropriate show to do, very timely show to do right now.
So we love silver and gold. We're going to get into that. But the thing that was funny was that we started saving silver in our house and in our little condo in La Jolla, California. And then we said, silver and gold are liquid. I mean, you can go to cash pretty quickly. That's what we like about it. So we bought a house in Portland, where it's now on fire. But anyway, Kim had to go down the street lugging these huge bags of silver.
Well, they said I needed like $23,000 deposit or down payment, and I'm like, oh my God, we don't have that. And Robert, you were out of town, and I opened up our little closet in the bedroom closet, and there's stacks of silver bars. I'm like, here we go, and I just cashed it in, and we bought our house. We have a very special guest today. And our guest today is Chris Powell, and he's a secretary, treasurer, and director of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, GATA. And it was organized in January 1999. And he's going to tell you all about it and why he started it, or what the reason is for starting this important organization. So Chris, welcome to the show.
And the main reason is because the gold and silver prices are manipulated. Because everything's manipulated today. But I'm really happy to have Chris on because I kept hearing about this GATA, and they go against the grain. They go against Wall Street and the big banks and all this. So anyway, Chris, thank you for your courage to go against the powers to be. So tell us a little bit about your background and what does GATA do?
Well, I've been in the newspaper business since I got out of high school in 1967. I was a reporter, managing editor of a daily paper in Connecticut. Until about 2 years ago when I retired. I'm a columnist for the paper now. I was looking for contrarian investment options back in late 1998, and I came upon an ad, maybe in the Wall Street Journal, one of those ads where they say, "Hey, send us $10 and we'll get you a dozen, free trial subscriptions to some financial letters." I did that. One of the letters I got was Jim Blanchard's Gold newsletter, which is now being run by Brian London. Blanchard wrote. Yeah, well, we're in the cult now, and you can't get out. Blanchard was writing in late '98 that gold was really unusually low, and I had heard somewhere buy low and sell high. So I subscribed to Gold Newsletter, and I quickly came across Bill Murphy's internet site, La Metropole Cafe, which concentrated on the gold and silver markets. Bill was a former futures trader. Bill very quickly identified what seemed to be manipulation in the gold and silver markets. He was attuned to technical analysis, and he saw that whenever gold and silver came to price points that technical analysis would deem significant, the metals were pounded back into submission by the bullion banks that dominated the futures markets. Bill began writing in his nightly commentary, to which I was subscribing, that gold and silver were being manipulated by the banks. And after a few weeks, I tired of this. I'd had at the newspaper a fair amount of experience with antitrust law because the newspaper I worked for was independently owned by a local family and was always being attacked by the chain-owned papers nearby that were trying to prevent us from getting the necessary syndicated features that every paper has to have. We had to sue them once or twice under antitrust law. So I had some familiarity from that and from my college education, such as it was in American history and antitrust law. So finally I wrote Bill a note saying, listen, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that you're correct here, that the gold and silver markets are being manipulated. But if they are being manipulated by these guys, it would seem to be a violation of the Sherman Act and the Clayton Act and 15 state antitrust acts. And if that's the case, then somebody ought to start a committee to hire a antitrust law firm on a contingency basis to sue the bastards for triple damages in either state or federal court. And if somebody wanted to start such a committee, I would contribute $500 to it. Bill thought that was a good idea. And so we started the committee. Fortuitously, we got a very large contribution from a South African gold entrepreneur not long after that. We did hire a very big antitrust law firm in Philadelphia, Berger and Montague, gave them our money. And after a few months of research, they came back to us and said, well, you're screwed, because under the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, the federal government has the authority to rig the gold market completely. And if the bullion banks are just acting as government agents here, then there's no recourse in antitrust law.
So hang on, Chris. So the federal government passed legislation that said it could manipulate the price of gold and silver?
Yes, it's been public policy for many years. The Gold Reserve Act of 1934, under which the gold confiscation that President Roosevelt arranged was implemented.
And that's why it was illegal for Americans to own gold.
Yes, until 1974, monetary gold anyway. Anyway, the Gold Reserve Act of 1934 created the Exchange Stabilization Fund in the Treasury Department, and the Exchange Stabilization Fund, like the Exchange Equalization Account, and
I want everybody to listen what Chris is saying here. It's very important because the price of money is manipulated by gold.
Yeah, well,
that's why it was illegal in 1933 for America. They were required to turn in their gold, and I think they paid them $28 for their gold, and then they jacked it up.
Yeah, then they revalued it to $35. But anyway, this is the law. It has been the law since 1934. You can look it up. The Gold Reserve Act of 1934 created the Exchange Stabilization Fund in the Treasury Department and authorized the Exchange Stabilization Fund to trade in gold and related items on behalf of the Treasury Department. In fact, if you go to the Treasury Department's internet site today, I haven't been there for a few weeks, but I don't think they've changed it, and you look up the Exchange Stabilization Fund, you find that the Exchange Stabilization Fund has the authority not only to intervene surreptitiously in the gold market, it has the authority to intervene surreptitiously on behalf of the U.S. government in any market in the world, not just U.S. markets, but any market in the world. So we found fairly quickly that we had no recourse under antitrust law. We did bring a case in federal court, U.S. District Court in Boston back in 2001 against the Bank for National Settlements, the Treasury Department, the Fed, the bullion banks, looking for a somewhat different interpretation of the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. Our case, which was conducted by Red Chow, who's a Harvard-trained lawyer who happened to own shares in the Bank for National Settlement, which really was the core of the case. He did not win that case. The case was dismissed on a jurisdictional technicality, but there was a single hearing.
Chris, please keep it simple.
An assistant U.S. attorney got up before the judge, moved for dismissal of the case on the grounds that the government claimed the power to do exactly what the lawsuit complained of. That is, the government claimed that under the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, the government had the power to rig the gold market exactly as our lawsuit complained of. So I'm just saying, under the Gold Reserve Act of 34, as interpreted recently by the Justice Department, the U.S. government has the full power to rig not only the gold market in secret, but to do so to any market in the world.
So it is legal for the U.S. government to manipulate the price of gold.
And not only manipulate it, but to do so in secret so as to deceive investors in other countries.
Good. So what happened in 2000, the price of gold went down to around $300, and today it's pushing 2,000. I want you to talk about, when we come back from the break, why does $2,000 gold threaten the powers to be? We'll be right back. Hello, Robert Kiyosaki, TheRichDad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about the manipulation of the price of gold and silver. And it's a very important show because as we speak, today is around August 2020. And the price of gold is bouncing. It went to an all-time high, just past $1,900. The question is, what's it going to do from here? That's the question everybody wants to know. And who does that threaten? Does $2,000 gold, or what Jim Rickards is calling for is $15,000 an ounce gold in the year 2025, it's going to piss somebody off. And we want to know who. So our guest today is Chris Powell. He's the Secretary Treasurer and the Director of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. So that's very important. It's a very important program. And you can listen to this program anytime, anywhere on iTunes, Android, and YouTube. And leave us a review whenever you want to listen. And all of our podcasts are archived at richdadradio.com. We archive them because we don't sell gold and silver, stocks, bonds, or real estate. We're an education company. We want you to understand what's going on in the financial markets. And the purpose of Rich Dad is to keep it simple, KISS, keep it super simple. So if you have friends, family members, or business partners who are saving dollars or pesos or yen, This is your most important show, because what happened in 1971, President Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, which turned the US dollar into debt. And that's why Kim and I are mega millionaires today, because we use debt as money. And we don't save cash, we save gold, silver, and Bitcoin. But now that finally gold has hit approximately 2,000 an ounce, and Records is calling for 15,000 an ounce, our guest today is a very important guest, because he's going to explain, possibly, there's no guarantees, who does $2,000 to $15,000 an ounce gold threaten, and what might happen. Any comments, Kim?
Well, I just found it fascinating that that Chris and Gata brought out the fact that the Gold Reserve Act of 1934 said that, hey, the government can manipulate the gold and silver markets and any markets all over the world. They have the legal right to do that. So, Chris, what we want to know is, with the gold over 2,000, who is threatened? If this keeps rising, who is threatened, and what do you see? Where do you see gold going to?
Well, gold is a currency, just like the dollar, the pound, the euro. And as a currency, it competes with government currencies. Governments don't like that. They don't like competition with their currency, because if one currency does well, people will flee the currency that doesn't do well and go into the other currency. Governments do not want to see a flight out of their currencies into gold. Gold is something that potentially they cannot control. It's outside, to a great extent, of the central banking system. If people are using gold as money instead of dollars or euros or pounds or other government currencies, governments lose control over the public. They lose control over the economy. They lose power generally, and that is the threat that gold, in the hands of ordinary people throughout the world, being used as money again, poses to governments.
So how are they going to manipulate this one now? That's the question. I mean, it took a long time for gold to break 1915, or whatever it was, $1,915, whatever it is. It went shooting back up and then was pushed right back down. I know people were clearing, the people were taking their profits. But right now, what is Mnuchin and all these? What's the Fed thinking about this price of gold? And will they try and keep it lower?
Well, they certainly tried to keep it lower this week. Somebody hit the futures markets with a lot of imaginary gold that they sold, and no doubt the government did this through the bullion banks that trade on the futures markets as government agents. There's a school of thought that the governments eventually will want to raise the gold price precisely to devalue their currencies and to devalue debt. The economists Paul Brodsky and Lee Quaintance wrote a paper 8 years ago saying that this was actually probably the big worldwide central banking scheme, that they know they need to devalue the currencies, they need to devalue debt, that the debt is consuming the world in interest payments that are unpayable. Brodsky and Quaintance hypothesized that central banks were trying to redistribute the world's gold reserves among themselves to hedge their dollar exposure.
Yeah, so Chris, so doesn't this go back to 1934? Because that's what Roosevelt did. He was buying gold, let's say $28, but then he moved the price up to $35 so that he could make the dollar more valuable. I don't know what he was doing, but that's really the correlation between then and now.
Yes, they can use, central banks can use gold to reliquify themselves, to hedge themselves against devaluation of their own currencies. The economists Brodsky and Quaintance hypothesized 8 years ago that was the long-term scheme here. And I think their hypothesis is very plausible. But for the meantime, central banks use bullion banks to sell what's called paper gold, imaginary gold, on the futures markets to control the price. The problem with this is that it leaves the world with, perhaps 80-90% of the gold it thinks it owns doesn't exist. It's just paper claims on financial institutions that don't have the metal.
Yes, Chris, could you explain that point?
Yeah.
Because that's how, but a lot of, like I have a hard time with that. You sell something in the futures market And that's how they're manipulating the price. Can you explain that one?
Well, the futures market, is supposed to be a delivery market every few months, but as a practical matter, futures are cash settled. They're not settled by delivery of the commodity being traded. So bullion banks that trade the futures markets in gold and silver have sold a lot of not only futures contracts, but they have issued claims on what's called unallocated gold. They give you a certificate that says, "Oh, we owe you this amount of gold, and we'll keep it for you." The problem is they've sold more certificates when they've got gold in the vault. And this fractional reserve gold banking system, worked very well for them and governments for many years. But in recent months, with the economy declining and the virus epidemic shutting down economies, there's been a much increased demand for real metal. And this, we believe, is collapsing the fractional reserve gold banking system because they don't have the metal to back up all the gold, the paper gold that they've sold.
So can I ask you this? How does that affect the ETFs like SLV and GLD?
Yeah, it's a very good question, whether those exchange traded funds have the metal that they report. The researcher for the Bullion Star bullion operation in Singapore, Ronan Manley, discovered a few weeks ago that the GLD gold exchange traded fund was actually borrowing gold from the Bank of England to stuff its portfolio with. That gold that GLD was reporting wasn't really GLD's gold. There's many games like this being played around the world in the gold banking system because there isn't enough gold to cover all the claims to gold that have been sold.
So do people, if they have the ETFs of gold and silver ETFs, will anybody ever say, "Hey, I want gold or silver," instead of just pay me the cash?
The rules of the exchange traded funds are that you can take gold out of them only if you are first what's called an authorized participant. That is a big international bullion bank. And I think if you assemble, I think something like 100,000 shares for conversion into metal. As a practical matter, that makes it impossible.
So the average person cannot.
So ordinary investors in gold and silver. Yeah.
So interrupt again. The reason hard money people like myself and my friends the reason we don't like GLD and SLV is, let's say the price of gold goes to 10,000. We go to them, we say, "Okay, we want our gold." They say, "No, we'll give you $10,000."
Yeah. So it's in the prospectus now. Ordinary investors can't convert from GLD or SLV.
That's correct. And so those guys like us who are hard currency people that don't like, that's why when you go to a coin store to buy gold and silver, they'll never recommend silver or gold ETFs, but you go to a stockbroker, they'll say buy gold and silver ETFs because they're paper. And any gold investor who invests in the ETFs, those two ETFs, might as well flush his money down the toilet because those funds are used to short the market when the banks need to knock the price down. They will borrow gold, borrow shares out of the ETFs and hit the futures market with it. It's like, look who the custodian of the metal in those funds is. The custodian of GLD, the Gold Exchange Traded Fund, is HSBC, which is a big short in the gold market, a big bullion bank. The custodian of the silver, claimed to be an SLV, is JP Morgan Chase, which is another big bullion bank that shorts the market. You don't invest with those banks if you want the metal to go up. If you invest with those banks, you might as well be throwing your money away. Chris, now you're talking, man. Now you're talking to our audience. You sound like me now. I would call the shares a piece of what. But anyway, the biggest point here is to understand the different points of view out there. You go to a stockbroker, it's GLD, SLV. But you come to Kim and myself or my friends, they won't touch that stuff.
No. The good advice is, if you can't hold it in your hand, or if you can't get access to it and know you can hold it in your hand, you don't own it.
So in your crystal ball, Chris, what do you see happening in the future? Do you see gold taking off? Do you see more manipulation happening? What's your crystal ball say?
Well, I do think the Brodsky acquaintance hypothesis is very, very plausible. We know that there have been devaluations against gold by governments with their currencies many times over the years. I think what has happened before will happen again. Currencies do devalue gradually and sometimes suddenly against gold. I do expect there will be another international currency revaluation in next year, 2, 5 years, something like that, which will involve gold at a much higher price. You already see governments around the world trying to get out of the tyranny of the U.S. dollar and the international financial system. Russia and China, of course, are the big players in that, but many other central banks have been buying gold in recent years, and they've been doing this because they don't want so much of their reserves in the U.S. dollar. They realize that if they are locked into the dollar system, they basically are slaves of the United States. The United States increasingly is putting sanctions on other countries and other officials that cross the United States in foreign policy. That wakes countries up. They realize, if we rely on the dollar for our reserve currency, we're the slave of the United States. They need some diversification. And we see that in the gold purchases that other central banks have been making in recent years. I think for the last 10 years, central banks have been net buyers of gold. Now, that doesn't mean this revaluation is going to happen tomorrow. It could happen over this weekend. I think it will be done on a Sunday night before the Asian markets open, because that's when they do currency revaluations. But there is a split among central banks and governments in the world. There's a U.S.-centric faction, and there's the other faction. And those other countries are trying to move away from the dollar gradually without crashing the dollars in their foreign exchange reserves. China's trying to acquire more gold without crashing the dollar. Russia's been doing the same. They're walking a tightrope. But the trend away from the dollar and toward gold is a more neutral, a much fairer international reserve currency. That's pretty apparent right now. I don't know if I'll live to see it. I think you guys will. But that kind of thing, revaluations of gold, that's happened before. It will happen again.
Well, I really thank you for your diligence, and you're taking those bastards on and explaining it to other people, because Tim and I kind of do it just by buying physical gold and silver.
That's the most revolutionary act any person on this planet can undertake.
Yeah. So let me ask you this one, because everybody wants to know your crystal ball. Okay. So when Guys Like Records, who's a friend of ours, says 15,000 gold by 2025, what pops up in Chris Powell's head? What's your opinion?
Well, I think Jim has also said, you got to be careful what you wish for. I think 15,000 gold is entirely plausible on a historic ratio. But in a 15,000 gold world, a Big Mac may be $400.
Good point.
Or there may be war shortages. I don't know. Bobby Godsell, who was the chairman of CEO of AngloGold in South Africa for many years, he said we want a good gold price in a good world. And I'm not sure that objective is going to be reached.
So you're saying that if the price of gold starts to skyrocket, it's going to be bad for the economies worldwide? Well,
not necessarily, but it could signal great disruptions that we're not prepared for. If the central banks are smart and they see what must happen, which is that their currencies and debts must be devalued in order to save the real economy, maybe a gold revaluation and a devaluation of the dollar and the other major currencies can be arranged in a well-organized way. I have to think that they're thinking about this. The trend of central banks away from the dollar and into gold is plain. Will there be the necessary international cooperation to arrange something like this without a lot of disruption to the world economy? I don't know.
So there's going to be a pessimist and an optimist in this real world. But one of the reasons I hesitate when, Records calls for $15,000 gold, that means everything else is in big trouble. Isn't that what it means? It's almost like a doomsday thing that would happen.
Well, it means the currencies and the government bonds are overextended. But good Lord, can anybody see that right now? I mean, is there anything left to the market economy in the world? In my work, I mean, I keep running into people who acknowledge that everything is being manipulated in the markets except gold. That's their position, that gold is the only thing that central banks aren't playing with. I mean, in my view, the real danger here has been for some years with all this central bank intervention. There are no markets anymore. There are just interventions.
Chris, I agree with you 100%. So I want to really thank you for being so adamant and being so forthright and being a member of GATA. And thank you for contributing to the Rich Dad audience and the Rich Dad radio show. So keep up the good luck. We'd like to have you back again. Okay.
Thanks very much, guys.
When gold's 15,000, we'll call you.
If the phones work.
The phones work. Good. Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So we come back, we'll be a little wrap up with Kim and I, because we've been gold and silver bugs for a long time, and now we're Bitcoin. Simply because, when I was in Vietnam, that little Vietnamese woman, she schooled me. She schooled me as to what gold is. Gold is God's money. So we'll be right back. Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about gold and silver this morning. And once again, listen to the Rich Dad Radio program anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android and YouTube. And please leave a comment and ask your friends to listen to this show, because it's a very important show about money. And once again, you can go to richdadradio.com. All of our programs are archived because we're solely an educational program. We don't sell gold, silver, Bitcoin, real estate, or newsletters, which is purely educational. And the reason we archive them is if you listen to this program again, you'll be twice as smart. But more importantly, please get your friends, family members, and business associates to listen to this program and discuss, and you will understand far more than 99.99% of the world's population. Yeah. But that's not saying much. Most people know nothing about gold, silver, and money. So with that, I want to thank Chris Powell again. He is the Secretary of Treasury and Director of the Gold Anti-Trust Action Committee. You can tell he's hot on this thing.
Yeah, he is.
Because it's about manipulation. But my God, we're in the middle of an election year. Everything's manipulated. Everything's fake these days. I don't know who to believe. I don't know what's true or not. But we're all used to this. But one thing is important. If they manipulate gold and silver, they manipulate the world economy. So the reason what Chris Powell was saying is so important is if they and I think they have to keep printing money. And so the more they print money, the more valuable gold, silver, and Bitcoin become. Because exactly as Chris Powell says, gold, silver, and Bitcoin operate outside the money system. And that's what really pisses off the banks. Okay, so that's why it's important. So Kim and I have been gold bugs for years. We've actually started a silver mine in Argentina and a gold mine in China, and we learned the hard way. Don't trust the Chinese. I mean, they not only steal intellectual property, they'll steal your gold mine if you strike
our
gold.
Mine. They did take it once we found gold. Not until we found gold and put millions of dollars into this were they interested. But then once we found gold, they were very interested. Yeah. Yes, funny how that works.
So ladies and gentlemen, so Chris is talking about the manipulation of gold price. Try the stealing of $1 billion gold mine. It kind of, Kim and I were a little depressed for a couple of hours, weren't we? But would you tell everybody about one of our best teachers, Frank? Frank was the best teacher because he was the guy that got us into this crazy business of finding gold mines in China, silver mines in Argentina, and then we took them public on the Toronto Stock Exchange, the TSE. And that guy, Frank, was the biggest optimist. I never met a guy like him before.
No, he was the ultimate entrepreneur. He was an optimist, and he was a marketing guy, and he could raise money. Oh my God, that's what I learned most from Frank was how to raise money. And if you think the federal government is manipulating, look at the characters behind the gold and silver markets. Holy mackerel. They're telling all kinds of stories out there. So he was a great teacher for business, for me, and for raising capital.
Yeah, you guys think, Obama and Biden and Trump and all of those guys are crooks. I mean, the biggest crooks live in Canada, because Kim and I hung out in the Vancouver Stock Exchange, where every Fredo Bandito lived up there. And it's so much fun because they're all full of shit. They're all bullshit.
Well, if you can raise money when you have nothing except this dream and what you think is going to happen.
No, a piece of dirt.
It's about all you had, but they're still raising money and they're raising millions. I mean, that's a skill and that's an art.
Richard always teaches you have to have a team. And, Frank will assemble this team of other bullshit artists. He'd get this mining engineer and say, well, here is, what was his name? He was wearing a hat. But he was supposed to be this famous mining engineer. And we would find this piece of nothing, a piece of dirt. And the mining engineer would go out there and bless it and say, this thing is loaded with gold. And we would raise money.
And then we'd all get excited. And then there's like nothing there. There's nothing there. Really? Wait for the next one. The next test, it'll show. There's gold. There's gold.
And this is before gold and silver was gold and silver at all-time lows. But it just shows the power of raising money and talking to people about the possibility of striking it rich, of getting rich. Now, the reason Kim and I were in it was because of what happened in 1971 and 1964 when they took gold and they basically ripped us all off through our money. So that's really the reason we do it. But we learned more about money and gold in the world markets via Frank, right?
Yeah, though he was one of our greatest mentors by far. So we did it for the reason for 71, but we also did it because we wanted to learn. We wanted to learn what Frank knew.
I went to, we've told the story before, we were putting together the Cashflow board game, and Kim we were supposed to be in Dallas to videotape the video that was supposed to go inside the Cashflow game. And I was still bugging Frank. I said, Frank, I want to learn how to take a company public through an IPO. So I kept bugging him. He wouldn't talk to me. And so finally he let me into his office one day up in North Phoenix. And he finally looked at me and says, you really want to learn, don't you? You're not here to ask for money, right? You're not here to ask for a job, are you? I said, no. You really want to learn how to take a company public, don't you? I said, yes. He says, be on a plane Saturday night. Remember that?
Oh, I remember. Because we were supposed to be on a plane Friday night to go to Austin, Texas to film this video that we've been working on for 6 months. And the big filming was happening. And so I hopped on a plane Friday, went to Austin, did the video. Robert hopped on a plane Saturday, went to Peru.
And it changed our lives. I was up at 17,000 feet and 13,000. There's no oxygen up there, by the way, sports fans. And I was stumbling along out there looking at gold mines and graves and all this stuff. Shining Path was up there. Shining Path was a terrorist. And our lives were in danger all the time. And I come all the way back to Phoenix. So Frank says, what'd you find out? I said, Frank, there's no gold up there. He says, I could have told you that. He says, I just wanted to know how bad you wanted it. And I think really that's the lesson of life, is how bad do you want to learn? Right?
Yep. That is, because we have so many people that come to us and say, oh, what's the secret answer? What's the answer? How do I get rich? What's the secret pill? What's the secret recipe? And there's no secret recipe. You just have to want it bad enough, because what it takes to become financially free is a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of education, a lot of mistakes.
But what happened is always the ripple effect was that I understood how valuable gold was, because you can't find the damn stuff. It's what they say, gold may be God's money, but the devil distributed it. And the devil distributed that stuff in the worst places on planet Earth. And I saw that. And so I said, I'm going to buy as much gold. Kim and I said, we're going to buy as much gold as possible. We're buying it at around $350 an ounce. We loaded up just because we knew how rare and hard it was to get. But ladies and gentlemen, gold and silver are God's money. Bitcoin is people's money, and the U.S. government is printing fake money as fast as they can right now. So anyway, I want to thank Chris Powell
Chris Powell, yes, excellent. And really check out GATA, G-A-T-A, the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, which he was mainly responsible for founding. And really what he wanted to do was bring out the truth of what was happening in the gold markets, which now is happening in all the markets, as he says. So listen to the show again, because there's a ton of information in there.
And then I was yelling at him about, you sound like I went to a gold conference. When you go to a gold conference, like Brian Lundeen, who was Jim Blanchard's partner, who made gold legal, helped make gold legal, he puts on the New Orleans Investment Conference. If you really want to find out what guys like that are saying, just sit there for 3 days, listen to these guys prattle on about gold. You don't need sleeping pills. You'd be sound asleep. But what's interesting about these conferences are the people you meet at. Like I met Tucker Carlson there. I go to all the booths. I get to talk to all the other gold miners who are selling holes in the ground with the hopes and dreams of starting to get rich. But it's just, life is this daring adventure. And that's why I love gold and silver. Right, Kim?
That's right.
So anyway, thank you all for listening. It's a very exciting time. I highly recommend getting gold, silver, and Bitcoin because the federal government and the Treasury, the federal bank, the government, and the Treasury are printing as fast as they can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mẹ ru con hiu hiu chưa hè mùa lụt